This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Don Ma, filling in for Tiffany Meyer. Hours before the biggest primary day this year, the Supreme Court clears the way for Trump to appear on the ballot in all 50 states. Meanwhile, President Biden doubles down on his vow to beat Trump. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao from Palm Beach, Florida. Good evening to you, Iris. Now, Trump's reaction to today's decision, what is it and what is at stake here?
Good evening to you, Don. So speaking from his Mar-a-Lago club right behind us right here in Palm Beach, Florida, former President Trump called today's ruling by the Supreme Court an extremely important one, and that one would unify the country. He also issues a direct message to President Biden. Watch.
It's a very big day for America. It's a big step toward unification. President Biden, number one, stop weaponization. Fight your fight yourself.
In a 9-0 decision on Monday, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that only Congress would have the authority to decide whether someone can run for office, but not the states. I mean, while that effectively vanquishes the ballot challenges in not only Colorado, but also in other states like Maine and Illinois, where there have been similar attempts to kick Trump off the ballot, citing an insurrection clause in the Constitution. And while Trump's Republican allies in Congress are also applauding today's decision, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin is vowing to work with his Democratic allies and to now find a way through Congress to kick Trump off the ballot. Watch.
I am working with a number of my colleagues, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Eric Swalwell, to revive legislation that we had to set up a process by which we could determine that someone who committed insurrection is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Meanwhile, Trump is also calling on the Supreme Court justices to side with him in his claim for presidential immunity in the Justice Department's election interference case. In that case, the oral arguments will be heard by the Supreme Court justices next month in April. And while Trump is accusing President Biden of weaponizing the Justice Department, President Biden's campaign today responded to Trump's speech at Mar-a-Lago, saying President Trump is only focused on himself, while President Biden's focused on things that actually matter. Back to you, Don.
All right, Iris, thank you very much for the update. Another court case related to former President Trump, Allen Weisselberg, pleaded guilty today. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization is on trial for perjury. Weisselberg will spend 5 months in jail after prosecutors say he lied under oath during questioning in Trump's civil fraud trial. The questions were about allegations that Trump inflated his wealth on financial statements given to banks and insurance companies. Weisselberg served 100 days in jail last year after pleading guilty to dodging taxes. He is on probation. A new development in the fight against illegal immigration. Texas is now set to start arresting and deporting illegal immigrants under a new state law. But the Biden administration is already appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court to stop the law from taking effect. NTD's Arian Pazar has more from the southern border.
A Texas law known as Senate Bill 4 is now set to take effect this week after all. A federal judge recently struck the law down, but an appeals court now overturned that decision. Now Texas is planning to use this law to arrest illegal immigrants for trespassing and then deport them. Now the number of illegal border crossings in Texas has been going down fast, but it's now increasing here in California. I spoke with Bill Wells, the mayor of El Cajon, a city right next to San Diego, and he tells me that the immigration crisis is taking a huge toll on California.
If you come over and you're an illegal immigrant in San Diego, we're going to give you a free attorney to help with your immigration status. We're going to give you free health care. If you want to have a sex change operation, we're going to pay for that. Flooded the hospitals and the school systems and the Social Security office and the welfare office. Everything is at its breaking point. And you now say, let's add another 1,000 people a day just to San Diego.
So you just heard the mayor talking about 1,000 people a day. So what he's describing, what he's referring to is Border Patrol, picking up illegal immigrants close to the border wall here actually. Then they process them, give them a court date, and after that they drop them off at transit centers throughout San Diego. Now here you can see what such a drop-off by Border Patrol looks like. We filmed this on Sunday. People exit the bus, wait for maybe 30 minutes, and then the NGOs pick them up. A Chinese immigrant at that transit center told us why he's coming to the United States.
Frankly, China's economy is not doing so well. It's not as good as we had hoped. It's definitely not comparable to the United States, to be honest. I learned about coming to the United States online. It tells you how to come here by foot.
Now we know that many immigrants coming to the United States have to pay criminal organizations while they're on the journey. One individual from Brazil told me how that works.
Our bus driver paid them. They had it all arranged. He gave them the bribe.
So from what I've seen so far is that in many cases people come here for economic reasons and criminals actually end up profiting from that. Ariane Pastar, NTD News, San Diego.
The suspect in the Pentagon leak, Jack Teixeira, has agreed to a 16-year prison sentence. This is according to the plea agreement filed with the court. The filing shows that Teixeira will plead guilty to all 6 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information. In exchange, he will not face charges under the Espionage Act. The 22-year-old is a former member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. He was accused of the biggest leak of classified Pentagon documents in years. He started posting them in 2022 on the social media platform Discord. Teixeira has been held in federal custody since his arrest in April last year. He previously pleaded not guilty to the charges. Israel Defense Forces continue to keep the pressure on Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip as talks for a temporary ceasefire continue. And after a 4-day march, thousands of Israelis reached Jerusalem as they called for an immediate release of the hostages. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest on the war.
Over the weekend, Israel Defense Forces released video showing airstrikes on Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip, including these 2 terrorists in Khan Yunis who allegedly fired rockets into Israel on Saturday, and another Hamas terrorist riding in this vehicle in central Gaza. But this terrorist apparently got away after he took cover in an ambulance. And Hamas terrorists recently released their own video showing how they used tunnels to attack Israeli troops. And residents of the Gaza Strip continue to be caught in the middle. On Monday, this man said he lost his sister-in-law, his niece, and his nephew in an airstrike.
We don't have any problems with anyone. As you can see, we were sleeping in our houses with no problem. We don't have weapons or rockets or anything.
And many questions remain about the deadly incident on Thursday, when over 100 people were reportedly killed during a humanitarian aid delivery to the Gaza Strip. Witnesses accused Israeli troops of opening fire on the crowds. On Sunday, the IDF released the findings of their investigation.
Our initial review has confirmed that no strike was carried out by the IDF towards the aid convoy. The majority of Palestinians were killed or injured as a result of the stampede.
He added that Israeli troops retreated but responded to individuals who approached them and posed an immediate threat. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris on Sunday said the U.S. delivered its first airdrop of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. And she said this about the Iran-backed terrorist group.
Hamas claims it wants a ceasefire. Well, there is a deal on the table. And as we have said, Hamas needs to agree to that deal.
And on Saturday, thousands of Israelis who had been marching for 4 days from near the border of the Gaza Strip reached Jerusalem.
We are here marching in support of the families of those who have been kidnapped, wishing that they will be released soon.
Over 100 hostages are still being held captive in the Gaza Strip. On Monday, Hamas and Egyptian mediators said they were continuing talks to try to get a ceasefire that could happen before Ramadan, which starts in about 1 week. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The United Nations released a report today saying there's evidence that shows sexual violence took place during the October 7th massacre. The UN also said there is clear and convincing information that sexual violence continues against the hostages held in the Gaza Strip. The announcement comes after almost 5 months of war and Israeli officials' repeated calls for the UN to admit there was sexual violence during the terrorist attack. U.S. authorities urging citizens in Haiti to leave the country as soon as possible. This as thousands of Haitian prisoners remain on the loose after armed groups broke them out of the nation's largest penitentiary. The U.S. State Department said its embassy is currently limiting its operations.
So, first of all, we are closely monitoring the situation and condemn efforts by gangs to further destabilize and take control of Haiti. We announced yesterday that the embassy has moved to limited operations with no public services available the first 3 days of this week due to the ongoing violence in Port-au-Prince.
Haiti's government on Sunday declared a state of emergency after violent clashes in the nation's capital led to the prison breach. It appears to be an effort from gang members to oust Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Henry took a trip to Kenya last week in hopes of retaking control of his country with the help of 1,000 Kenyan police officers. But during his absence, gang members began to attack the city's airport, police stations, and major prisons. Haitian gangs have become more powerful since Henry's predecessor was assassinated in 2021. According to UN officials, gangs control about 80% of Haiti's capital. Congressional leaders have reached bipartisan agreement on the first 6 funding bills needed to keep the government running. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more details on the appropriations package.
Congressional leaders have released a 1,050-page document. The text details the dispense of $450 billion in 6 different appropriation bills. These bills, if approved, would fund the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce and Energy, Transportation, Veterans Affairs, Interior, Justice, Housing, and Urban Development. Republicans are touting the bills as a victory because of some of the spending cuts, saying the Environmental Protection Agency would see a 10% cut, a 7% cut to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and a 6% cut to the FBI. Democrats are claiming victory because the package keeps funding for a food assistance program for low-income families and does not include proposed restrictions on abortion. In total, the 6 spending bills authorize $70 billion less than what President Biden had requested for fiscal year 2024. Lawmakers have 72 hours to review the bill. It is expected that the House of Representatives could vote on these 6 separate bills as soon as Wednesday, giving the Senate enough time to cast their vote before the Friday deadline. Despite the advances to avoid a government shutdown, Senator Joe Manchin did not see a victory in the compromise proposal.
This 118th Congress, I'm ashamed to end my career in the absolute worst performing Congress in the history of the United States of America, when we came off of the 117th, which will go down as one of the most productive Congresses.
Freedom Caucus members told NTD they oppose the 6-bill package and say the bills should be voted on individually. Lawmakers have yet to agree on the second group of 6 appropriation bills, which include funding for the Pentagon and 70% of total government funding. Congress needs to pass the second 6-bill package by March 22nd in order to avoid a government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Martinez, NTD News.
Super Tuesday is coming up tomorrow. It's by far the biggest day on the primary elections calendar for both parties. Let's take a look at what to expect.
Super Tuesday, the unofficial name for the biggest day of voting in the presidential primary season. On March 5th, 15 states and 1 territory will go to the polls. More than a third of Republican delegates are up for grabs, with an equally large portion of Democratic delegates. Former President Trump will go into the contests with a comfortable lead over his only remaining GOP competitor, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Up until Sunday, Trump had won every primary contest he was in. Haley secured her first victory in D.C., but opinion polls show the former president is still the overwhelming favorite in most Super Tuesday states.
You have to get out the vote because we have to send big numbers up for November 5th. We have to let them know that we're a freight train and we're going and we're not stopping.
On the Democratic side, President Biden has been all but chosen as the party's candidate for November, winning all the primaries so far. But his popularity among some factions of the party is wavering. His support of Israel has antagonized him to younger progressives. Many voters are also concerned about his age. One state worth watching for on Tuesday is North Carolina, where 74 delegates will be awarded to the GOP winner. Unaffiliated voters will also be allowed to cast their votes in the swing state. Independent voters so far have broadly preferred Haley over Trump. For many voters, illegal immigration and the economy have been top issues this election cycle.
I think that immigration is a key issue for most Americans right now.
Well, immigration, government, I think, is out of control. Crime is another. Those are the three big issues.
And there's no reason for me in my career to have to live paycheck to paycheck whenever I make good money.
Primaries will continue until early June. Conventions don't take place until July for Republicans and August for Democrats.
As we head into Super Tuesday, what are some things to watch out for? Joining me now is Democratic strategist Robin Biro, who will be joining us tomorrow night as well for the special live coverage. And as of today, Biro is a Democratic candidate for the Georgia Senate. So Robin, I know you're going to be joining Tiffany Meyer and Steve Lance here in studio tomorrow for NTD Super Tuesday live coverage. So to set the stage, I mean, what are you going to be looking out for to start?
Any sort of weird anomalies. There are 15 states that will be having primaries tomorrow on Super Tuesday. 2 of those are caucus states, but I'm really keeping an eye on Texas and California. Those are, of course, the lion's share of delegates. And let me just say, of these 15 states, 6 of them are completely open primaries, meaning that you don't really have to have a party affiliation. You can, if I were a Democrat, I could just go vote for Nikki Haley, for example, if I were in one of these states. So I want to be looking out for weird anomalies like that, because there is an organized effort in the Democratic Party for Democrats to vote for Nikki Haley to try and oust Trump.
And on that note, how do you think today's Supreme Court ruling keeping Trump on the ballot, how is that going to affect voters on Super Tuesday?
I think there will be more Democratic voters will be more energized. Maybe some that were kind of sitting on the lines and maybe not that happy with the way Joe Biden is performing will actually turn out to vote specifically against Trump. It'll be a repeat of 2020. I still firmly assert that that's why he won. I don't think it was 81 million people that necessarily that enthusiastic about Joe Biden. They just didn't want to see another Trump presidency.
And I think we can agree that tomorrow's elections are effectively Haley's last shot to potentially slow Trump's path towards nomination. So according to the polls, Haley isn't actually expected to pick up too many delegates, but, you know, she hasn't indicated any desire to drop out. So, you know, what do you think it's going to take for Haley to stay in the race beyond Super Tuesday? What sort of margins or wins will she need?
Right now, Donald Trump has 247 delegates that he's been awarded. Haley has 24. So she has 10% of what he's got. She'll have to do better. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to money. Her fourth quarter reporting, she had a little more than $24 million cash on hand. But she only had about $3 million of pledged money from PACs, which pales in comparison to Donald Trump's $33 million cash on hand and $25 million from PACs. She's just not getting the PAC money that she needs to stay viable. So her campaign will end when the money runs out, to be honest. That's what happened to DeSantis anyways.
And let's talk about a little bit the other side. President Biden is all but the official nominee for the Democratic Party. But I want to point this out too. Voter perception still matters, right? And that can have a big impact on voter turnout in general. So what sort of margins does Biden need to win by to demonstrate that his popularity and strength within his own party?
I would say that it's not necessarily the margins, it's the money. I want to see how much money he's going to be raising. I need to hear from the campaign how much money, because he's still beating Donald Trump dollar for dollar as far as fourth quarter reporting by about $13 million. But AIPAC just announced yesterday that they're dumping $100 million into Republican races, including Donald Trump's. So that's going to be a huge boost. We need Joe Biden has got to come in strong with cash donations. I don't really give a lot of credence to the other Democratic opposition from Marianne Williamson or Mr. Dean, but I think Biden should edge out more than 80%.
And today, the New York Times ran an article based on a poll titled, "No matter race, age, or gender, more voters say Trump's policies helped than Biden's." So looking towards the general, how can Biden win over these voters who, based on their own lived experience, may feel more inclined to vote for Trump?
Messaging. It's up to the Democratic Party themselves, Democratic Party leadership, and Joe Biden's campaign to work on messaging. They are not talking enough about what they have done that has helped benefit everyday Americans. And frankly, Joe Biden himself has got to get back out on the campaign trail. Just anecdotally, I went to the first official Biden rally last week. It was here in Atlanta, and Joe wasn't there. Jill Biden was there, but he himself wasn't there. We need him himself on the trail.
All right, Robin, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Super Tuesday, fast approaching, and NTD News will be covering all the action. We'll have a lot prepared for you, including special guests, on-the-ground coverage, and of course, the Data Hub. Join Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer on The Nation Decides 2024, live Tuesday, March 5th at 6 p.m. Eastern. The Sierra Nevada mountains experienced the season's most significant snowstorm, causing major roadways to close, with further snowfall anticipated throughout the week. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the blizzard.
The hazardous storm dumped over 7 feet of snow at Donner Peak, an 8,000-foot summit in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Wind gusts had exceeded 190 miles per hour at the mountain peaks, while lower elevations had experienced gusts ranging from 50 to 100 miles per hour. According to the National Weather Service, several inches of snow are predicted to fall through Monday afternoon at elevations over 3,500 feet. As of early Monday, over 100 miles of I-80 from the Nevada border to Colfax, California, continues to be shut down due to the massive blizzard. And over 8,000 utility customers were left without power, causing business operations to slow down.
Business has been pretty slow considering all the roads were shut down and some of the hills were shut down, but we totally get it because the roads haven't been that safe, so we don't really want people driving around and all that sort of stuff.
Nearly a foot of snow is expected to accumulate in some areas, while rain is forecasted to hit the northern coast of California. Winter storm warnings are in effect in California, Oregon, Idaho, and Colorado.
The Weather Service will not issue a blizzard warning if it's just super heavy snow, as is more often the case in the mountains. Then they'll issue a more common winter storm warning. But in a true blizzard, you have sustained winds above a threshold for multiple consecutive hours, along with significant falling or blowing snow.
Despite authorities encouraging residents to stay home until the storm has passed, some people still decided to hit the slopes.
The avid conditions are very high. There's a wind slab and storm slab. The storm has been pretty crazy. I've mostly just been hanging out inside, but today we're gonna go ski some mellow tree lines and hopefully avoid the avalanches.
We are gonna go backcountry skiing because the resort is closed and we're bored.
Meteorologists projected that the alerts would remain in effect until Wednesday morning. The Weather Prediction Center characterized the conditions in the area as unsettled and anticipated more very heavy snowfall at higher elevations in the mountains. Christina Corona, NTD News, California.
Joining me now to talk about the Supreme Court's historic ruling, we have Mark Miller, senior attorney at Pacific Legal. Now, Mark, what's your assessment of the court's opinion?
Don, the Supreme Court spoke with a unanimous voice here. It said effectively that a state does not get to bounce a candidate from the presidential ballot that would invite a patchwork of decisions across the country and would frustrate the intent of the voting for our president. And as I said, that was a unanimous decision. It was 5-4 in the sense that 4 of the justices only concurred in the result, and of course concurred in some of the decision in the majority opinion. But at the end of the day, it was 9-0 that states like Colorado or Maine or even Illinois don't get to decide that the president is not going to be nominated, that a candidate for president is not going to be nominated.
And I want to point this out as well. The Supreme Court's opinion doesn't address whether Trump's actions on January 6th actually qualified as an insurrection or not. So why do you think the court took the route they did with this ruling?
I think, Don, the way they took this ruling was they wanted to be unanimous. And so they intentionally avoided addressing whether former President Trump was an oath-breaking insurrectionist, which is the way Justice Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan referred to somebody who would be bounced from the ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They didn't want to address it, probably because all the justices don't agree on that point. I'm just speculating, but I think it's a reasonable speculation, as opposed to the fact that they all agree that one state can't remove a presidential candidate from the ballot, because then that would be one state making a decision for the whole country.
So, Mark, while this opinion was unanimous, Justices Barrett, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson did express disagreement about whether the court needed to go as far as it did in this ruling. So explain that for us.
Well, you know, Don, I find it interesting and perhaps meaningful that it's a breakdown of 5 men on one side and the 4 women on the other side. And what the 4 women said was that to the majorities, they said, we don't have to decide anything more than the fact that Colorado doesn't get to make this decision, that it's Congress that makes the decision as to who's going to be on the ballot. But in fact, the opinion went further. The 5 justices went so far as to say that Congress would have to pass a law to decide whether or not an oath-breaking insurrectionist can be on the ballot or not. And so the 4 women said, we don't have to answer that question. In a sense, it reminds me, and perhaps I'm being a little bit humorous here, the idea that sometimes men want to solve all the problems, and the women say, well, I don't want you to solve every problem, just the problem I put before you. In any event, that's what happened here. The 4 women do not like how far the 5 justices went on the other side.
So looking ahead, what could be the future impacts of this ruling on these additional questions?
Well, there's absolutely no question. This will be a decision that is studied for years and years, for decades. We certainly look at Bush versus Gore, 24 years on. The justices who concurred, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson, went out of their way to make sure that even though they agreed in the result and they were clear on that this is a unanimous decision, they wanted the history books to reflect that they cited Dobbs and Bush versus Gore in expressing their displeasure with how far the opinion went. They did that not just for themselves, but also for history. This is going to have a decision that will impact the country for as long as it survives.
Now, Mark, I don't know if you found this interesting, but actually legal experts have noted that the ruling on this case came out unusually fast. Do you think there's a reason behind that? Why do you think that is?
I think the justices, all of them, want the law to be kept separate from politics. And the more that Supreme Court has to get involved in these sort of political fights, which is really what this case was about, keeping somebody off the ballot, is a presidential attack, is a political attack on party versus party. It's not really a legal question. The fact that it was 9-0 to me suggests it wasn't so much a difficult legal question, because all 9 justices agreed, left to right of the political aisle. And so what they're saying by deciding it quickly is, look, let the people decide who they're going to vote on, or Congress can get involved on the political question, but it shouldn't be up to the justices as to who's going to be president. And they don't want to see another Bush versus Gore.
And as well, Mark, I want to ask you a very fundamental question. How significant is this ruling for the Constitution and foundation of American democracy?
This is absolutely, Don, very significant. There's been very few cases that interpreted Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. In fact, the oral argument reflected as much. The justices, for the most part, were relying upon comments made during the passage of the 14th Amendment, or cases that were discussed this part of the 14th Amendment, but not cases where the Supreme Court was addressing it, but just one judge or one justice. And so this is the first time that the Supreme Court is really having to make a decision of such profound importance, and it will affect all the presidential elections to come.
And maybe you can comment on this as well for our viewers. So we had an unanimous decision. So how much of a pivotal moment was this ruling for the court?
Well, I think it's important for the court because it gets at the idea that the court is not a political institution. Both on the left and the right, there tends to be an emphasis that the court is just made up of justices who were appointed by a certain political party and that they just make decisions based on their political allegiance. And that's not true. If you believe in the rule of law, which I do, these justices are trying to follow the rule of law and not follow and just support whoever appointed them. And by deciding this decision 9-0, the justices are sending that message that this is not a political decision, this is a question of the rule of law.
And Mark, finally, what, if anything, does this ruling and its speed tell us about what we can expect for the Supreme Court's ruling on Trump's other Trump presidential immunity case?
Well, we have that important immunity case that was just recently granted. They're going to hear argument on that case the week of April 22nd. If they follow the practice they followed here, you could see a decision in that case within a month of April 22nd. That would be late May. I think the bottom line implication of this decision and how quickly it was made is that the court does not want to be involved in deciding who is the next president of the United States. They want that to be left to the voters and, to the extent that the 14th Amendment says so, up to Congress as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark, for your time today.
Thank you.
Presidential candidate Nikki Haley won Washington, D.C.'s GOP primary yesterday, ending former President Trump's undefeated winning streak. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on Haley's win.
Great to see everybody.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley secured her first GOP primary win in D.C. Sunday with over 62% of the vote. Trump received 33%. The district is deep blue, with 92% voting for President Biden in 2020. Haley picks up 19 delegates, bringing her total up to 43. Trump has roughly 240 delegates heading into Super Tuesday, when around a third of the GOP delegates will be at stake. The D.C. Republican Party ran a closed primary this year, where only registered Republicans could vote. Haley's campaign on X stated Republicans closest to Washington dysfunction are rejecting chaos and division after the win. Trump on Truth Social said he wasn't concerned about D.C. because it has very few delegates and no upside. He criticized Haley for wasting time and money there. Haley told NBC over the weekend she no longer feels bound by her pledge to the Republican National Committee to support the GOP nominee due to changes in the RNC, along with keeping any thoughts of losing away while running. Haley told voters in Vermont Sunday she's determined to stay in the race.
When 70% of Americans say they don't want Donald Trump or Joe Biden, yes, I'm going to keep on fighting.
Trump in 2016 received less than 14% of the vote and no delegates in D.C. as he went on to win the GOP nomination. D.C.'s Democratic primary will be held in June. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Now, are you tired of political news and looking for a change of pace? Well, I have great news for you. NTD TV's first entertainment program premieres March 10th. Host Ruby Lovell will bring you glamour and substance from the entertainment capital, Los Angeles. Now, this is your go-to source for all things Hollywood, so tune in for the first episode of Right on LA with Ruby Lovell this Sunday, March 10th, starting at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on NTD News. We're returning now with some breaking news. The Supreme Court is temporarily freezing Texas immigration law that will let them arrest and deport illegal immigrants. Now, the law will be blocked from taking effect until March 13th, and during that time, the court will review the case. The Biden administration filed an emergency application with the Supreme Court just hours ago, asking the justices to block the law without intervention. It will have gone into effect March 10th. And more breaking news, a U.S. district court has ruled in favor of religious organizations and healthcare workers over transgender procedures. The court decided the Biden administration cannot force religious groups to cover gender treatments, including surgeries, counseling, and hormone therapies. The Christian Employers Alliance filed the lawsuit against the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The commission's mandates say religious employers must provide health insurance that covers gender transitions. Otherwise, they would face penalties over discrimination of gender identity. The federal court ruled that the mandates violates religious beliefs. And Blackrock says ESG could materially hurt its core business, including its reputation, its assets, its clients, and most importantly, its earnings. NTD's Virginia Gibson explains.
In its annual regulatory filing, Blackrock says ESG may adversely affect Blackrock's reputation, ability to attract and retain clients, employees, shareholders, and business partners, or result in litigation, legal, or governmental action, which may cause its assets under management, revenue and earnings to decline. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. ESG supporters say it's a set of standards for measuring ethics and environmental impact. Will Hild of Consumers Research says its objective is to promote a left-wing political agenda.
They were using those assets to push an ESG agenda, which includes things like far-left social policy, net zero targets.
According to Hild, BlackRock claims companies that don't follow these policies will perform poorly, so it pushes corporate America to adopt them. BlackRock acknowledges that negative views towards ESG may hurt its business. Some states, such as Texas, have even banned government entities from doing business with BlackRock. The company is also facing increasing regulatory scrutiny on ESG-related matters globally, leading to higher compliance costs, which could further hurt BlackRock's earnings.
This certainly isn't something BlackRock wanted to admit to, but their compliance attorneys are saying, listen, you have all of these states taking aggressive action towards you because of your ESG activities. You need to admit that, because if something were to happen to the company later because of that, you're going to be sued for having not notified investors of that.
BlackRock reportedly has an ESG portfolio valued at $700 billion. Virginia Gibson, NTD News.
Now, is the Chinese Communist Party attempting to influence America's film industry? You might remember how Top Gun Maverick attempted to strip the Taiwanese and Japanese flags off Tom Cruise's jacket, or how Iron Man 3 inserted a Chinese doctor into the movie who saves the life of Tony Stark. Was it artistic license or something more sinister? These issues are explored in the groundbreaking new documentary, Hollywood Takeover, China's Control in the Film Industry. This NTD original film pulls back the curtain on how Hollywood is helping to further a global adversary's agenda, the consequences that will have on America's future, and what brave individuals are doing to change the tide. The film premieres on the red carpet in Los Angeles on March 6th at 6:30 p.m. It will be released globally on March 8th on Epoch TV. For more information about the documentary, please visit HollywoodTakeover.com. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, in college football, there's been reported discussions about some big changes being made to playoffs that seem to favor the SEC and Big Ten conferences. How significant are those changes?
You know, very significant. I'm not even talking about expanding from 12 to 14 teams. I'm talking about the proposal to give both the SEC and Big Ten 3 automatic bids as compared to just 2 for the Big 12 and ACC, plus automatically giving the 2 first-round byes to the winners of the SEC and Big Ten, no matter who is ranked number 1. In other words, before the season even starts, they're saying we're already going to be better than you, so let's guarantee now that we get more spots in the playoffs, including the best 2 that skip the first round. Honestly, I'm baffled that anyone would come to the table with these demands. I really hope they don't go through with them. You know, football championships are won on the field during the season, not before the season starts.
And as well, let me ask you this. How does that compare to the 12-team format that's set to debut in 2024?
You know, the 12-team format, very fair in my opinion. It's simply the 5 highest-ranked conference champions get automatic bids, with the remaining 7 bids being decided by the committee. Now, there's 10 conferences, but in most every season, that basically guarantees the winners of the 4 power conferences, that is the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12, would all get in. But it doesn't explicitly guarantee it in writing. It still has to be won on the field. I mean, to me, that's perfect. I would say I don't know why this new format is being discussed, but I'd like to think I do. For one, it's money. ESPN is paying nearly $8 billion to televise these playoffs for another 6 seasons. Everyone wants a part of that pie, but you've got to be in the playoffs to actually get that. I'll certainly grant that both the SEC and Big Ten, after rating the Big 12 and Pac-12, certainly have the highest conference reputations now, but it still has to be decided on the field, or you can really hurt, I think, the integrity of the game. So I hope they stick to this 12-team fairer format.
Well, Dave, as always, pleasure hearing your insight.
Thank you, Don.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Don Ma. Good night.